Recently, I watched some testimonies, and it gave me the courage to share my own story. My goal in sharing this account is to help those who hear it avoid taking the same path I did. I'm from Belém in the state of Pará, and my life has always been marked by financial struggles. My mother passed away when I was 15. She was a drug user, and like many others, paid with her own life for the wrong choices she made. As for my father, I never knew him. He was never present, and my maternal grandmother, Mrs. Teresa, raised me. Despite our humble circumstances, my grandmother always did her best to provide me with love and care. She taught me important values and, above all, introduced me to faith. I grew up attending church. God is love, and I have always had a special passion for praising Him. Singing brought me an indescribable peace, and I felt the Lord's presence in every moment of worship. However, as I got older, I began to drift away from that path. The death of my mother, with her life ruined by addiction, was a turning point for me. From that moment on, a rebellion started to grow inside me. At 15, without a mother to guide me, I began going out more often, trying to fill the emptiness I felt. The poverty we lived in deeply bothered me. My grandmother always said it's better to live modestly with God than to have a lot without Him. But inside me, a growing ambition took hold. A strong desire to break free from that situation at any cost. I knew there was something inside me that could take me further. My appearance always drew attention wherever I went. Men's lewd glances followed me at every turn, but I rejected them. I didn't want anything to do with anyone who thought they could buy me with empty words and shallow actions. I looked at those trying to get close, simple men with no future, and I refused to lower myself to that level. But time passes, and when needs become urgent, the desire for a better life speaks louder than morals. With great effort, I managed to get a job at a busy shopping mall in the city on Avenida Visconde de Sousa Franco, number 776, in the neighborhood of Reduto, in the municipality of Belém. The salary wasn't great, but at least now my grandmother and I could have proper food on the table. Having red meat at home used to be a luxury we couldn't afford. Still, life felt heavy. Ever since my grandfather passed away, my grandmother had carried all the responsibilities alone, and I could see in her eyes the weariness of someone who had endured too much. Days at the mall were exhausting. I worked until I couldn't anymore, but the money seemed to slip through my fingers. There was barely enough to cover the basic expenses. Each month end, my frustration grew. I looked around and wondered why some people had so much while I was struggling just to survive. My grandmother, with her simple and unwavering faith, always repeated, "God will provide, my daughter. In due time, He takes care of everything." But I, consumed by exhaustion and resentment, couldn't accept those words. I would look at her and, lacking patience, respond, "You've been saying that forever, but our life stays the same. God has never given us anything." She, with a calm gaze, would say, "My wealth isn't of this world, my daughter. Everything here passes, but up in heaven, the streets are made of gold." Though her words silenced me for a moment, the burning desire for more stayed inside me. More comfort, more freedom, more than that cramped life could offer. Things began to change when I got a new job at a high-end clothing store in the same mall. There, the environment was different. The customers were refined, spending without a second thought, and I realized the opportunities were greater. It was on one of those days that my life took a different turn. A man entered the store. He looked to be around 50 years old, but his elegant demeanor and well-groomed appearance set him apart from the other customers. While the other saleswomen tried hard to get his attention, he ignored them all and came straight to me. "Good morning," he said with a confident smile. "I want to be helped by you. What's your name?" For a moment I was surprised, but I replied, "Mary Beatrice." His smile widened. "Beautiful name. Can I call you Beatrice?" I nodded, trying to keep my professional composure. "Of course. How can I help you?" He seemed more interested in me than in the clothes, yet he insisted on buying a lot. I spent hours assisting him, pointing out every detail, and in the end he spent 11,47. 36, more than I earned in several months of work. To me, that moment felt surreal, as if a door to a new world had suddenly opened. As he was about to leave, he turned back to me once more. "Beatrice, may I have your phone number?" For a moment I felt shy. "I would give it to you, but I can't afford a cell phone," I replied, a hint of embarrassment in my voice. His smile faded slightly, but his gaze stayed calm. He didn't push the subject. He just shook his head and said, "It's okay, no problem." The next day he showed up again at the store, this time with an even more direct approach. He asked who the manager was. When she arrived, he said seriously, "This employee served me impeccably with great courtesy, and I would like to give her a gift. I know I'm on work hours, so I ask for your permission to present her with something." The manager, surprised and curious about his gesture, gave him permission. That's when he handed me a sealed box, a brand new Samsung phone with the SIM card included. My hands trembled as I received that gift. I didn't know what to say. I was stunned. The other saleswomen looked at me with envy, but at the same time I felt that something bigger was happening there. When I got home, still in disbelief, I opened the box with trembling fingers. I peeled off the plastic from the screen and inserted the SIM card. As soon as I turned the phone on, he called me. It was as if he had been eagerly waiting to talk to me. From that moment on, my life was never the same. In the following days, we started talking more and more. Little by little, I became involved with him. I had never been with anyone before, and when he found out I was a virgin, I noticed a different sparkle in his eyes. Something changed for him. It didn't take long before I quit my job at his invitation. From then on, my routine revolved around him. He gave me a generous allowance, unlimited credit cards, designer clothes, and took me to places I never imagined I'd see. Trips, fancy dinners, and luxury hotels. I was living a golden dream, but I didn't realize that this happiness was as fragile as glass, ready to shatter. For an entire year, I felt like a queen. Everything that once seemed impossible was now within my reach. I completely distanced myself from the simple life I had with my grandmother. But like every fairy tale, the enchantment didn't last forever. The end came quickly and humiliatingly. One ordinary night, while we were dining at a fancy restaurant, his wife caught us. The look of hatred in her eyes pierced my soul. She screamed, caused a scene, and in that instant the illusion shattered. He tried to protect me, but it was useless. In a few moments, everything I had sold myself for was torn away from me. After that night, I knew I couldn't go back to a life of working 12 hours a day for crumbs. The taste of luxury had already spoiled me. I wanted more, and was willing to go to the ends of the earth to get it. It was on one of those empty, frivolous nights that I met Julia. She was different, radiating an air of mystery and power that pulled me in. When I told her my story, there was no surprise on her face, just a knowing smile before she said, "You're leaving money on the table, girl. With that beauty, you could be making 10-15 grand a week. You're in the wrong place." Those words stunned me who always thought I had already gone too far. Suddenly I realized there was an even darker path ahead. Curious, I asked, "What do you mean by the right place?" Julia chuckled softly as if she held a dangerous secret. It was then she revealed she worked in Campinas, in the largest open-air prostitution district in South America, Jardim Itatinga. At first the idea seemed absurd. I still felt remnants of shame and morality, but as always the power of money spoke louder. The conversation turned to promises of wealth and a lifestyle I would never have if I stayed stuck in that dull routine. Deep down I knew I was about to cross an irreversible line, but greed had already taken hold of me. When I told my grandmother about my plans, she seemed to already know what I was about to do. Her voice, full of wisdom, sounded like a warning I was certain to ignore. "My daughter, you are a college-educated woman and your ambition is high, but be careful what you wish for. Sometimes certain choices bring more pain than pleasure. Not all money is worth it, and remember, Satan is watching you, just waiting for you to slip. Return to God before it's too late." Those words struck me like a blade, but I pushed them aside. I hugged my grandmother, trying to hide my guilt, and told her I was off to chase my dreams. Deep down, she already knew I was heading down a dangerous path. The following week, I set off with Ju and 2 other girls. Our destination, Itatinga Garden in Campinas. When I arrived, I realized nothing could have prepared me for what I saw. It was a world without rules, without limits. Money passed through rough hands and empty hearts. On the first day, I just watched, studying every move Ju made, how she manipulated men and made the money flow. By the second day, I already had a street name, Jade, a dark-haired beauty with long black hair and a curvy figure. That's how I became known there. From that moment on, I was no longer the same, and there was no turning back. The first days were tough. Fear still lingered around me. But as the money grew, any trace of shame vanished. What once seemed wrong was now just part of my new reality. I started getting involved in expensive parties, wild raves and orgies with powerful men and women. Little by little, I drifted away from the simple girl I used to be. I still called my grandmother, but I never told her the truth. I always said I was working in a fancy store in a big city. With her silent wisdom, she never questioned me, but deep down I knew she saw the truth I was trying to hide. I worked on one of the busiest streets in Itatinga Garden, but for safety reasons I never revealed the name of the place. I no longer felt innocent, just driven by an insatiable hunger for more money and more power. The cost I still didn't know, but soon the bill would come, and it would be higher than I could imagine. Time passed, and in 3 years I had achieved many of the things I had dreamed of: my own house in Vinhedo, a new car, and a comfortable financial cushion. However, my grandmother, who had always been a strong-willed woman, was ill. Even so, she refused to accept my financial help, which hurt me deeply. I really wanted to bring her to live with me to give her the quality of life she deserved, but she stubbornly refused. Despite being well established, what worried me most at that moment was her health. One day I started my work shift as usual when he appeared. Tall, dark-haired, with a strong build and tattoos scattered across his arms. Gold chains glistened around his neck as he approached with a mysterious smile. When our eyes met, my heart raced. What an attractive man, I thought. His name was Carlos. We spent hours talking, and by the end of my shift, he insisted on staying with me until nightfall. I was completely drawn to him, and it seemed he felt the same way. What started as a casual fling quickly turned into something more serious. A few months later, he asked me to be his girlfriend. I accepted without hesitation. On weekends, we began traveling together. The passion only grew. Even though he was financially successful, whenever I asked about his job, he always changed the subject, which made me curious. It was during a boat trip in Ubatuba that, finally pressed by my insistence, he opened up. "Jad, I need to be honest with you. I'm a bank robber, and I'm part of a criminal faction," he revealed. Those words froze me. My body shivered and the world seemed to stop for a moment. I didn't know how to react, but somehow I managed to hide my surprise and stay calm. "I understand," I replied, trying to sound composed, even though inside the pieces of the puzzle began to fit together in a way that scared me. In the following months, we stayed together. Despite the turbulent life he brought into mine, I was completely in love and believed I could change everything. I wanted a peaceful life, a family, but things took an unexpected turn. Carlos began to pull away from me and started seeing another woman. It consumed me from the inside. The pain was immense, as if my heart had been ripped from my chest. I confronted him, trying to understand what happened, but he cruelly dismissed me as if I were a discarded object. I was devastated, lost weight, my work suffered, and my mind was overwhelmed with a whirlwind of thoughts. That's when my friend Julia, who had traveled to Belém do Pará, where we lived, returned and found me in that state. She invited me to her house, and I accepted since I needed it. Ju always knew how to handle situations like this. When I got there, she told me she had a solution for my problem. "Friend, I'll take you to Sorocaba. There's a woman there, a healer, who has always helped me, and she can fix all this, but she charges a lot." I didn't hesitate. The idea of getting Carlos back, regaining control over my life, felt like the only way out. Together, we set off for Sorocaba. With my heart racing, I knew I was about to make a decision that would change everything. When we arrived at Mrs. Lord's house, I was surprised. The place was more luxurious than I had imagined, with sophisticated decor and an air of mystery. She welcomed us and led us to a more private space where she did her work. There I poured out everything I was going through and expressed my desire to bind Carlos so he would never leave me again, that he would be forever in love with me. Mrs. Lords listened carefully, and when I finished my story, she asked an important question. "Are you sure about what you want, Jade? Because once it's done, there's no going back. Also, I see another man in your life, someone good, honest, who could change everything. Don't you want to give him a chance?" I looked at her firmly and said, "No, I want Carlos." Mrs. Lords studied me for a moment, thoughtful, and then said, "This will cost $1,000, and in 21 days he will be back. Bring a photo of both of you and his underwear." I didn't hesitate, ready to pay any price to have Carlos back. When I got home, I was surprised by my grandmother, who always called me as I had asked. When I answered, she said in a serious tone, "Maria Jade, the Lord revealed to me and told me to warn you to be careful with what you're doing. This is a bond from the evil one." I was silent, not knowing how to respond. I just said, "Okay, but how are you?" She mentioned her heart was weak, but the doctors said everything was fine. We said goodbye, but her words kept echoing in my mind. 21 days later, just as Mrs. Lords had promised, Carlos came looking for me. He showed up with a bouquet of flowers, apologizing and wanting to rekindle our relationship. When I saw that, I thought to myself, Mrs. Lords really knows what she's doing. I accepted Carlos back without a second thought, and everything seemed to be falling into place. But despite that, I kept working as a call girl. At first he seemed to accept it, but over time something inside him changed. Carlos became possessive and increasingly aggressive. The affectionate and charming man I once knew was gone. At his insistence, I quit my job, thinking it would calm his unhealthy jealousy, but things only got worse. I remember one night when we went to a steakhouse. Everything was fine until he noticed a man looking at me. Without hesitation, Carlos started a fight right at the table, accusing me of knowing the guy and hinting that he was an old client of mine. No matter how much I tried to explain that I didn't know him, he wouldn't believe me. The atmosphere became unbearable, and every time we went out together, it turned into a tension-filled ordeal. Before long, I felt suffocated in that toxic relationship. Eventually exhausted, I decided to break up with him, but it wasn't that simple. Carlos refused to accept the breakup and began stalking me. I went back to work at Itatinga trying to regain my independence, but he wouldn't leave me alone. He threatened that if I didn't leave, he would kill me. Everyone there was afraid of him. Carlos was known in the criminal world, and his armed presence ensured no one dared to challenge him. My life turned into hell. Every day was like playing Russian roulette, never knowing when he would show up to terrorize me again. Then, on a night that seemed like any other, everything suddenly turned brutal. Some Palmeiras players were at the place, and like many drunk men, one of them started acting like I was his girlfriend. I knew it was wrong, but I went along with it for the money. It was my way of surviving. That's when Carlos showed up. Seeing me with the player, his eyes filled with rage. Without saying a word, he crossed the room, grabbed my arm with such force that I stumbled. The player tried to step in, but Carlos pulled out a gun and slammed it violently against his head. The lively atmosphere, once full of laughter and music, fell completely silent. No one dared to stop Carlos. He dragged me outside as if I were just an object on the sidewalk. With his voice heavy with fury, he said, "You'll never kiss anyone again, Jade." Before I could react, I felt the cold metal of the gun pressing against my cheek, and then he pulled the trigger. When I opened my eyes, everything was in the past. The sterile hospital smell and the bright lights told me I was alive, but my body screamed in pain. I was hospitalized at Uro Verde Hospital, and the doctors said I was lucky to be there. The bullet had passed through my face from one side to the other without hitting any vital organs, but the aftermath was clear. Broken teeth, my tongue nearly severed, and a disfigured face. Every second in that bed was a vivid reminder of the nightmare I had been through. As I fought to recover my friend, Julia never left my side. She did everything she could to give me strength. But even with all the support, the physical pain was nothing compared to the emptiness I felt inside. In the middle of that dark week, my phone rang. I still couldn't speak, but Julia answered for me. What came next shattered any hope I still had. "Hello," she said cautiously. "This is Julia," replied a cold, authoritative voice on the other end of the line. "Who is this?" Julia asked, sensing something strange about the call. "We are from the military police. We're calling to inform you that your grandmother has passed away. She was found at home dead for 2 days. Her number was written in the Bible. That's why we're contacting you." Those words hit me like a fatal blow. My grandmother, the only person who had always been by my side, was gone forever. I tried to scream, tried to cry, but I couldn't even do that. Everything around me went dark, and before I could process the pain, the nurses sedated me. When I woke up, Julia was there, her eyes full of tears, trying to comfort me. But no comfort was enough to fill the void that had settled inside me. I had lost everything: my dignity, my freedom, and now the only person who truly loved me. The months that followed were pure torment. Every day was a battle against the physical pain, and even worse, the pain lodged deep in my soul. The scar on my face served as a cruel reminder of everything I had endured. Every time I looked in the mirror, I saw not only the mark left by the bullet, but the mark of all my wrong choices, of everything I had lost. As if that wasn't enough, my speech was never the same again. Simple words became challenges, and with every frustrating attempt to express myself, the feeling of helplessness overwhelmed me. I was no longer the woman I used to be, and as if fate wanted to erase me completely. Carlos, the man who almost killed me, vanished without a trace. No news, no signs. It was as if he had never existed. But the scars he left behind were too real to be forgotten. After selling everything I owned in Campinas, I said goodbye to the few friends I still had. Some cried with me and promised to pray for me, but I knew that that place no longer belonged to me. With a broken heart, I boarded a plane back to the small town where it all began, to the simple house where my grandmother, the only person who ever truly loved me, had lived until her last breath. When I arrived, the sight of that modest little house brought me to my knees. Every brick seemed to hold the memory of who she was, of everything we had lost together. As I opened the door, the scent of coffee still seemed to linger in the air, as if at any moment I would find her sitting in the rocking chair, wearing that warm smile that made even the hardest days feel lighter. But she was no longer there, and never would be again. I knelt in the empty room and cried until I had no strength left. It was a deep cry, a lament from a place inside me I didn't even know existed. The truth crushed me. I was truly alone, completely alone, engulfed in that unbearable grief. Then I found something that broke me even more. On the small table next to her bed was a Bible, the same one she always took to my church. Inside, carefully folded, was a letter. My hands trembled as I unfolded the yellowed paper. As I began to read, my tears fell harder. "Mary Beatrice, your path has always been with God, not in this dirty world. It is better to have him than to have much without him." Those words pierced my soul like a knife. It was as if, from somewhere beyond this world, my grandmother was still trying to reach me, to pull me back before it was too late. I cried for days, tears of regret, longing, and an emptiness that seemed impossible to fill. But amidst all the pain, one certainty was growing in my heart. I needed to change. For myself, for her, for everything good that still remained in me. With the money I had saved, I renovated the house. Each painted wall was an effort to erase the marks of the past, to build something new, something she would be proud of. But even with the house in order, there was something inside me that remained broken, something neither time nor money could heal. It was then, on a quiet night, that I made a decision. With my disfigured face, with the scar that reminded me of all my mistakes, I took my beloved grandmother's Bible, now mine, and went to the church where she had always sat. There, in the same pew, as I listened to the word, I felt something burning inside me that I couldn't understand. And suddenly I began to speak in unfamiliar tongues. And there, after sincerely surrendering to God, I was baptized with the Holy Spirit. When I first walked into the church, even after giving myself to God, there was still a void, something I'd lost along with my dignity and my voice, the gift of singing. Since I was a girl, I had praised God with my voice, but after the gunshot, even that was taken from me. Still, something pushed me to try. That very night, with the church nearly empty, I gathered my courage and asked for a chance to sing. And I know that at church God is love. They don't usually give opportunities to non-members, but God was at work. So I took a deep breath and began to sing, even with my faltering speech, even with fear. Then I sang the hymn, "Oh, how blind I've been." And lost in my amazement, I realized that my voice and diction had returned to normal. Like a miracle, I began to speak clearly again, to sing, to feel alive once more. Do you remember what Mrs. Lords had said? "I see another man in your life of good character and honesty who will change everything." Every time I sang, Daniel, who played the guitar, accompanied me with perfect harmony. There was something in his eyes, a connection I had never felt before. After a service, Daniel approached me, his gaze locked on mine. He said softly but firmly, "God showed me in dreams, in revelation, that you would be my wife. And since then, I've never stopped praying for you. Will you marry me?" I didn't have to think. The yes came from my heart without hesitation. I accepted with my heart full of hope, something I never thought I would feel again. Today I have a beautiful family. My daughter Eloise bears my grandmother's name as a way to honor her. I have my home, a simple life, yet rich with the presence of God. Looking back, I see that the terror I endured for years taught me more than any other path. I saw hell, I lived through the terror, and it's something I wouldn't wish on any young woman. The love of money, power, and the illusion of an easy life. None of that is worth it. What truly matters is living in the presence of God, with love, peace, and a pure heart. I almost forgot. Do you remember Samira? She was one of the few friends who stood by me throughout my journey, from the darkest times to my turning point. After a while, I was at church praising from the depths of my heart the hymn 193 from the Christian harp, "The Downtrodden Soul." When I saw her walk through the door, there she was, Samira. She entered the church, and something about her was different. The look she carried was that of someone who was no longer the person I once knew. She was at peace, as if she had found something she had long searched for, but didn't know where to find. That moment during the service was pivotal. Samira made a decision right there in the middle of the church, in the same pew where I was baptized with fire. She surrendered to God. His presence surrounded her in a way that was impossible to ignore. I watched her with tears in my eyes, speechless, just feeling immense gratitude to see her there by my side now with a renewed heart. Samira, who was once lost, had now found her way. Today I am her wedding godmother, and Daniel, my husband, is the godfather. They got married in a simple ceremony, but one filled with love, and what moved me the most was seeing that they were both in the presence of God, with transformed hearts. The friendship that began back then in the harsh world was now a bond that transcended the material. That's how my story, which started with so much suffering and pain, transformed into a story of redemption. In place of terror, there was now peace. I looked back and saw scars, both physical and emotional, but I also saw the light God had placed on my path.